Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Cybersecurity Starts at the Top, presented by Nelson Gomez and Bo Jaykumar of Priority One Group. Please be aware that there will be a question and answer portion today at the end of the webinar. To avoid frequent interruptions during the webinar, please type your questions in the question box located on the right of your screen. They will be answered in the order received during the question and answer portion. Additionally, an electronic version of this presentation will be emailed to all participants following completion of today's webinar, and a recorded version will be available on the website for members only. Again, we would like to thank you for attending, and I will now turn things over to Nelson and Bo.
Good afternoon, everyone. As I was presented, Nelson Gomes from Priority One, with my colleague Bo, who's one of our cybersecurity experts, where we talk a little bit about cybersecurity and how it starts at the top. So I'm going to hand it over to Bo, and please, as we had said early in the presentation, hold your questions till the end, and we will address those as much as we can and as quickly as we can. So Bo, you're up.
Thanks, Nelson. Bo Jaykumar. So I've been working with cybersecurity for the last few years. Today we are going to cover these following 6 subjects: the need for cybersecurity program and what's at stake. So really just explaining why every company, regardless of what you do, what you practice, why everybody needs the specific cybersecurity program that's going to best fit them. Number 2, what we'll be discussing is the role of leadership. Cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility. As we'll go through that, a lot of people just think that it's just for the IT person, it's just for the owners, it's just for C-level executives. It's not. Cybersecurity can be affected by everybody, and everybody needs to be a participant about that. If you have a bottom level employee that is untrained and doesn't know what to do, they're going to cause a breach in your system. It's not if, it's when it will happen. Getting started. Picking a framework and establishing a risk baseline. So you really can't know what you need to protect, what you need to do, until you know what you need to do. Whether or not you're working in the healthcare facility, whether or not you're working in banking, whether or not you're doing PCI. Everybody's specific. They do usually follow. Everything points back to the NIST standards for the most part, and that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. But knowing what you need to do is definitely a good baseline. And getting a risk assessment, you can't protect what you don't know. The importance of policy from creation. So the importance of policy, every company, regardless what you are, whether you are a manufacturing company, whether or not you are healthcare, once again, banking, policy is very important for everybody. The bare minimum, we always tell everybody that you're going to at least need an acceptable use policy, then also a, what's the other one, Nelson, that I'm looking for? Use.
Right. Internet policy, email policies, how to address some of the security incident policies. So there's all these different policies, that are part of, your policies that you have. It's just not, you got to look at it and keep in mind that policies are just not a focus on HR or procedural policies, but you got to think about some of the IT policies, and in this case, that are focused just with cybersecurity.
Yeah, the incident response was the other one. So at the bare minimum, we always tell companies to at least have those 2. Obviously, there should be way more in place than that, but if you're trying to do the bare minimum, at least acceptable use and incident response. Implementation, establishing controls to reduce risk. So everybody wants to know what's in there. You gotta, it's not just having a firewall, it's not just having antivirus. There's several other controls that do need to be in place when you're implementing. And then, can't believe I forgot the incident response, and it's number 6. Plan the inevitable. It's not, once again, you're gonna hear me say this probably several times throughout the presentation. It's not if, it's when. If you haven't gotten breached this year, the chances, or if you haven't gotten breached last year, then the chances are, you're more likely to get hit this year. We always tell everybody it's not if, it's when. the need for cybersecurity program and what is at stake. A lot of small businesses don't think that they're going to get hit. They don't think that they're a target, and therefore they don't really believe in security for one reason or another. They don't see, whether or not they can't financially afford it, whether or not they just think it's useless. Regardless of it, everybody does need a program, and small businesses are getting attacked more than larger businesses. Everybody knows about the Target breach. Target gets breached. That sucks. They have a lot of money to back that up, though. So even when they're getting breached, they have the money for PR. They have the money to build back their reputation. Just because Target got breached, it doesn't mean that half the people that were there that got breached are going to stop going to Target. Target has the money to fight that and to counteract it. Small businesses, they don't. And it can cause a lot of different things, as listed in the middle there: data loss, financial damage, decreased productivity, employee confidence, and public reputation. Just to give you an example, there was a smaller organization based out of upstate New York. It was just a little mom and pop car shop. Over the past 50 years, they actually expanded and we're up to 6 different locations. About 2 years ago, we were trying to work with them a little bit, but, they didn't really believe in security for one way, shape, or another. They just didn't see the value in it. They got breached. So this small organization, built from one shop out to 6 different locations, got breached. Everybody that was on their monthly billing for car washes, all their information got breached. All their information got taken. It was all over the news. Upstate New York, it was very small, so that's all they had to report on for about a week. Within 6 months, all 6 locations were closed down. What they spent the last 50 years building, planning to hand it down to their kids, it's now gone. Just because they didn't want to do whatever, spend $5-10 grand on a risk assessment or to protect their data. So not only the public reputation on that aspect was a huge loss for them. Obviously, their data got lost too as well. All their information got breached, decreased productivity too as well. And their employees. I mean, if you're not secure, and if you're constantly, any business, if you constantly keep having downtime from getting breached, your employees are going to lose confidence in you. They're not going to feel like the organization cares, and eventually they're going to move on. Another one
just to
is,
kind of
yeah.
Just to add on to that, Bo, one of the things that that we're seeing in the healthcare space, and it's things that for everyone to be aware of. You got to be conscious of those third-party partners that you're working with. Many of you work with third-party billers, where they're accessing they may be accessing your systems remotely so they can do billing and going through that process. I can tell you that more and more we're seeing breaches because of third parties. Here's another one that we've seen that is actually a pretty target is HVAC units. Nowadays, everything is monitored remotely through technology, and the HVAC guys from maybe any of your larger practices, check in remotely and are able to make some changes, and those systems don't have the highest security in place. So keep that in mind, that third parties can be also one of those things that you got to take a look at and focus on as you go through this process. So you can be as secure as you want, but if you have your third parties that are working with you, that you rely on them, and again, IT being one of them, because we're also susceptible. I can tell you that, and more we're being targeted because we have access to a lot of our clients. So a lot of the things that we put in place with multi-factor authentication and security measures to ensure that not only are we protected, but our clients are protected as well. So think about that third party that may be working with you remotely and how they're doing. Just because they have a BAA doesn't mean that you're 100% protected. Please understand, you as a covered entity are liable. So certainly something to think about. Bo?
Yeah, I completely agree with Nelson on that too as well. And just to expand even just a little bit further onto that, third parties, I know people are just thinking of IT vendors or thinking about, just different specific vendors. You got to take into consideration too as well your cleaning crew, your maintenance workers. Are they doing background checks on these people? These people are able to walk into your building and, open up filing cabinets when nobody else is in the office. So even just taking it down as far as the maintenance crew, just be very, mindful of that. If you do happen to get breached, like I said, there's 58 malware attacks. Ransomware is expected to hit businesses within 14 seconds every time in 2019. So according to that statistic from Cybersecurity Ventures, just throughout this, there's already been probably about 20 people that were breached just during this small webinar. If you do get breached, there are companies devoted full time to ransomware negotiations. You can actually contact these people, and that's what they do for a living, and they are very successful because of the amount of ransomware attacks. Also, these smaller companies too as well. Sometimes, paying the ransom, if you do get hit with ransomware, it might be your best bet. The FBI and the police are always going to tell you that it's not, don't negotiate. But if you're going to be losing millions and millions of dollars, or you could just pay, whatever, 50,000 in Bitcoin, might be a better idea just to pay for that and get your information back.
And just to go a little bit on what Bo says, with some of the things, some of the, and we're going to get to a little bit when we talk about incident response. But the one thing that I would highly recommend, and what we've kind of made it a point to really bring some awareness in healthcare to our clients and those in the community is make sure you have some kind of cybersecurity assurance in place. I can tell you that, and make sure that the cybersecurity that you have in place covers certain things. So cybersecurity in an incident, when you have an incident and you have that insurance in place, a lot of these insurers have those tools. So they already have forensic people on that they work with. They already have attorneys that they already work with. They already have PR firms that they work with. So that alone is going to alleviate a lot of the headache that you have to go through. Yes, if you need to negotiate Bitcoin, those forensic guys already typically have a division within their organization that can do all that for you and just basically tell you here's where we are with things. So having a good cybersecurity coverage and understanding what kind of coverage you need is very important. So if you don't have one now, if you get anything out of today's webinar, is find out if you have something and what exactly it covers.
Great point, Nelson. All right, we can move along to the next one. Okay, on this one, we're going to talk about the role of leadership in cybersecurity and how it's everybody's responsibility. First and foremost, like I was saying at the beginning, a lot of people just think it's just IT or just the owner. First and foremost, the owners or whoever's in charge of that is going to have to set aside a budget. There's really nothing you can do as far as being an employee or being IT or being anybody else in the organization. If an owner doesn't believe in cybersecurity, they don't see its value, you can't really do anything on there. So, it starts off obviously with the owner, but everybody else is playing a specific role in this too as well. For the responsibility, yeah. So for the responsibilities, I'll go with, once again, what Nelson was talking on a little bit too, is just people that, implementing least privilege. For what you guys don't, for anybody here that doesn't know what least privilege is, just a really quick example of it is if I am working in the HR department, there is no reason whatsoever that I need access to financial records. There's no reason I should have it. There's no reason I will. And why I would say that is HR, so say for example, your HR team, whoever's in there gets hit, they click a malicious link, they get hit. Once that person is in, they're in underneath the HRs. They're in underneath their domain. So if they can't expand, they can't get to the finance records. That's one more thing protecting. So I don't know if do you want to add on to this, Nelson?
Yeah, the things of leadership, and one of the things that we've talked about and spent some time with clients is awareness, right? So putting some kind of awareness in place, making it part of your onboarding when you bring in a new employee, right? Through HR. you're going to go through an onboarding process with that person and training them in their job. Part of that training, you should consider having some kind of cybersecurity area where you can train them on. Now, one of the things that we've done internally here and recommend this to a lot of our clients is to have a variation of training. And that training could be awareness training where, for example, LinkedIn has a great training tool program that you can sign up depending on the amount of employees that you have. And you can do, they have cybersecurity training that you can do within their tool, which is a great tool to have. You assign it to your end users and they go through a process where, they now have to get trained on cybersecurity. That's part of what they do. One of the other things that we're doing is something that you may have heard. It's called phishing campaigns, where our clients, we develop phishing campaigns, to be quite honest, to catch the end user to see what their behavior is in responding to emails. And we do that on a quarterly basis. And if one of the users fails to go through the proper channels or to dismiss and not follow the process, then training occurs automatically. Say, okay, this was a phishing email and you didn't perform it correctly, so now you have to go through training. So having training as part of your program should continue to be something that you do on a regular basis. So awareness, and there's a lot of webinars out there, and MGMA has done a very good job of bringing that awareness, and I'm sure that it'll continue to do it. So take advantage of some of those events that take place to just bring awareness. And I could say that the majority of the time that attacks are being taken is because people are going after their credentials, whether it's through email or any other means. So having that awareness can definitely minimize that risk, and that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, just to expand just a little bit more. Thank you so much for that, Nelson, too, as well. Just right in the middle where it's saying we are the greatest vulnerability in any organization. We meaning the person. It's whether it be owner, IT, finance, people. People are the weakest link. You could have as many technical security assets in place, and all it takes is for one person to not know what they're doing, one person to click a link. And I'll be the first to admit, I have done that before when we've been training, like, doing a phishing email as well. I've done it. It's about learning and about, knowing what you did wrong, correcting your mistake. I did it once several years ago. Do you think that I ever click a link again now without being 100% sure where it's coming from? Everybody makes mistakes. It's okay. It's knowing how to correct yourself, how to train yourself afterwards, making sure when you are hiring a new employee that it is in their job description, that you need to know this. So they're aware of it, you're aware of it. It's not a one and done thing. Security is an ongoing process. It's never complete. It's never done. You need to constantly retrain your employees. There's always new links or always new malicious attacks coming out that we don't know about, literally daily. We could read up. I could read up on cybersecurity every day and still be behind. Yeah, that's really all. Nelson, you got anything else you want to add for this slide?
No, I think there's a lot more material that we can touch on. I don't want to go over any other stuff that's still coming up. So,
gotcha. Okay. Next, we're going to be talking about the importance of policy. So first of all, just like I said in the beginning, at the bare minimum, we tell every organization they should have acceptable use policy. Wow, why am I blanking on that one again? An incident response, I'm sorry, an incident response plan. You need to educate your employees. There's no point of having an incident response plan in effect if nobody knows what to do. Also having an incident response plan that's 5 years old, when you guys have had different changes in your organization, that's no good too as well. Minimally, we say at least every 6 months you should be reviewing this, and it's not just the owners that should be doing it. It's not just the HR staff. It's not just IT. It's everybody. What you guys should do at least every 6 months is just have a roundtable discussion. Let everybody know what they need to do in an incident response plan. So that way, when something does happen, because it will, everybody knows what to do. Educating employees is the best to guiding good behavior too as well. If they know what to do, if they know what they're looking for, if they know what to do if they get hacked, it's definitely going to reduce the liability there too as well. And one important thing too that we do, you can't have somebody creating a policy for you that isn't fluent with it, that doesn't know. You need to hire an expert. You need to get an expert or have an expert on staff. You know, you're not going to have your McDonald's guy cooking your steak when you go to a restaurant. You know, so if you're not 100% positive, if you're not, you know, knowing, eating, breathing, sleeping this stuff, hire somebody else to do it. Educate them on the policies. Use department names, or like, I'm sorry, use department like titles, like the CIO, the CEO. Don't say Rick. What happens when Rick leaves? Nobody knows what to do. Make sure that regulatory compliance. There's a lot of different organizations, whether it be financial, HIPAA. There's certain different policies besides the two that I've listed, and I'll continue to list, that you have to do. Every organization, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's healthcare, whether it's banking, whatever it is, they have to have some type of policies in place. And having a good policy in place is definitely going to help you react faster, prevent downtime, prevent loss of money, prevent loss of damages. Yeah, so just once again, reiterating the importance of the policy. Do you want to add on, Nelson?
Yeah, so, you know, with policy, it's like anything else. You know, we're in healthcare, you know, I'm sure you know, policy is a big thing, and trying to keep up with it is a challenge as it is. Us as a IT company that really has a focus in healthcare, you know, we basically follow the same similar guidelines as covered entity, just like you. And to have somebody just to be able to kind of maintain that is, as we all know, is not easy. So, you know, for us, we've determined that, you know, working with a third party that has a focus on that to be able to help us, and in combination with what we're doing, we're kind of helps us develop those policies that we don't know about or that we need to put into place. So having some sort of a template to go off of is better than nothing. And I know that, you know, as we go through this conversation, and it's typical, is, you know, some people become overwhelmed to like, where do I start? You know, I don't even know where to start. And then I use the, you know, eating the elephant type of analogy, right? It's one bite at a time. But, you know, hopefully at the end of the day, when we finish with our webinar, you'll get a better understanding of exactly where to start and some of the things that are important for your organization. So as far as policy is concerned, you know, you need to establish rules for the employees for the use of technology, right? You know, where they're going, where they can go, where they can't go, whether, you know, you have the tools to measure that or not, that's okay. But, you know, make sure that you have it in writing. You know, that's things like that. Having some of that in place is also going to reduce your corporate liability, right? So you need to think about how those policies are going to impact liability. And again, regulation and having HIPAA and how that intertwines with security and privacy is a big thing. So having all your ducks aligned for that is very important. And if you don't have it, then make sure you partner with somebody that can help you through that process. So as far as the importance of policy, I mean, we could talk about policy this whole presentation, but those are the things that I think are important to touch upon. So.
Yeah, that's a good point, Nelson, too, as well. So everything here, we're breezing through it, guys. This is not a whole summary. We're just trying to educate you as much as we can in the given time. So on that note, I'm going to move right along. So this one is implementation, establishing controls to reduce risk. This is the NIST framework. There's 5 pillars, as we call them: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. The first one is identifying. You can't protect what you don't know you have. We were actually doing a penetration test for an organization. They gave us a list of everything that they wanted us to test. We were able to get in through a server that they did not know was still hooked up to their system. So the fact that they didn't know that they had that they were a little upset with us. They're like, that wasn't on our list. Well, you know, you hired us to do a penetration test, so we're going to act as an ethical hacker. A hacker's not going to go, oh, sorry, didn't know that you guys didn't have that server up, so we're not going to breach your system because of that. So if you don't know what you don't have, you can't protect it. I can't stress that one enough. Do an inventory count, find out what you have, find out what you need to protect. Business contacts. What you're going to want to, so business contacts is, once again, I'll just go back to HIPAA because, we're very versed in that. HIPAA is going to follow different regulations than PCI, which is retail, different than DFS, which is a new regulation in New York State regarding insurance and financial institutions. So there's all these different frameworks for these different type of entities. NIST is really a pointer and kind of just a know-all, the National Institute of Standards of Technology, that really bases it on everything. But in regards to, knowing what business you have and knowing what you need to do, whether or not it be policies, whether or not it be that you have to do a penetration test every year, whether or not you have to do a risk assessment every year. So you have to know your own industry. If you don't, you need to contact somebody like us or somebody that knows what they're doing that can help you out with these regulations. Roles and responsibilities. Once again, this will just loop right back to the policy. People need to know. If they don't know, you can't expect them to perform. So just going over this, once again, every 6 months, going over your policies, making sure that, when a new employee is hired, they know their responsibilities. They know they're not supposed to be going on Pandora, and they know they're not supposed to be looking at pornographic websites. They need to know their roles and responsibility. A lot of it may seem like common sense, but you'd be surprised. The bigger organizations that are just hiring people nonstop, churning and burning employees and just giving them full access, and all it takes is that one person to click something and you're done. Identifying your resource supporting critical functions. So once again, you're going to want to identify everything that you have regarding the assets too as well, supporting critical functions. If a server goes down, do you guys have a backup server? If you get hit with a tornado, are you going to be able to, do you have a second location where you can come up? Obviously, if you're, in New Jersey, a tornado is not going to be that effective as somebody in Arkansas. So you might not need a separate location. You might just need a backup system. Even if you're backing up to the cloud, that's awesome. Just another way, critical supporting functions, downtime costs companies monies. And then last but not least, the vulnerabilities, threats, and risks. You should minimally be doing a vulnerability assessment, if not a penetration test, yearly, or whenever there's a change in the environment. If you guys migrate to Office 365, if you move office spaces, doing a vulnerability assessment, bare minimum once a year. Also risk assessments and threat detection too as well. Do you want to elaborate, Nelson?
Yeah, ultimately, we identify is, if you haven't done so, have somebody do an assessment to really identify your findings, and then those findings will give you what are the gaps, right? And then once you have those gaps, then you should be able to figure or develop a game plan on how you're going to address those gaps and what time frame you're going to address them and what the risks are. So if anything you get from this slide is with identify, is start with an assessment. If you haven't done so, is where am I and how bad is it, or how good is it, and where do I need to go next? So like that, it gives you a kind of a blueprint or a basic blueprint of where you are and where you need to go. This is essential, and more times than none, we find that this is not done enough times, because this is going to really give you an understanding of where you need to be and how you're going to get there. So that's all I have. I wanted to add.
Great, Nelson. What, like you said, you can't do any of these other steps if you don't know what you have.
Correct.
Moving on to protect. So you're going to prevent, limit, contain cyber events. The best way, bare minimum too as well, cyber or security awareness training. Once again, if your employees are educated, that's 9 out of 10 times that's where a breach is going to come from. You're always looking to protect what is called the three pillars: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So with security awareness training, it's really covering all that, and it can be geared towards different department heads. It can be geared towards just the employee. It can be geared towards, HR, can be geared towards the CIO. So really just knowing, protecting, that's to prevent and to limit breaches. The physical and logical safeguards. So physical one would be anything that you can really touch, like a camera. A good example that we always like to use is everybody's been to a gas pump. They have those pillars in front of those gas pumps, so you can't drive your car into the gas pump and blow it up. Obviously, there have been situations, everybody's seen those videos on YouTube or whatever, where people do hit those, but it is a deterrent, it is a safeguard, and it's a logical thing to have in place there. Having a security guard at a bank is a logical thing to have. Having a security guard at a bakery, probably not so logical. So really just, assessing it and what you need to do. Moving on to number 3, the least privilege. If you don't need access to something, you shouldn't have access. Whether it be your third-party IT provider, whether it be your in-house IT provider, they should definitely be limiting people's access. There's no reason that I need access to finances. If I click a link, I get breached, all of a sudden they have access to stuff that they shouldn't have. If I have least privileges and I only have access to what I need to do, whether it be documents for proposals or anything like that, or whether it just be general knowledge or documents that we have in place. If I get breached, it's not going to be as hurtful as if Nelson gets breached, who is the owner, So I don't need access to everything that, Nelson does. Security awareness training, once again, we can't stress that enough. Educate, educate, educate. And then typical IT protections. Obviously, you're going to want to have your antiviruses, your firewalls, your encryption, but those aren't the only things. Those are just, those are going to help you protect, but, without the knowledge of security awareness training, without, doing risk assessments, without having good policy in place, these things, not useless, but, they're not going to be as helpful. Do you want to add on, Nelson?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about a couple things. So as far as access control, and we see this at times when we're working with some clients in healthcare, where especially with their EHR, their practice management systems, where everybody has full privileges to everything, and they only know it after the fact, because it's just easy enough just to click on a button and say give everybody access. So auditing your security for those mission critical applications such as your EHR and your practice management should be part of your kind of 6-month policy thing to say, who has rights to what? And it's not a matter of, they need to see it. It's, do they really need it for their job? So those are some of the things that you need to outline. And part of that process is, develop in the job description for that user to say, okay, if this person is in billing, then this person only needs access to the billing module. They don't need access to scheduling, or they don't need access to the EHR itself. Maybe they don't, maybe they do. But, kind of putting those type of measures in place makes sense. As far as the security awareness training, I can't emphasize it enough. The only way that, that you're going to help with preventing is awareness. So have some kind of awareness program in place. Reach out to your IT folks and have them do a luncheon. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to do a luncheon and talk about security awareness and what are some of the things that you need to do. We do it. We found it to be very helpful for our client base to do that type of training. So definitely something. And as far as typical IT protection, yes, you need to have the tools in place to protect you as much as you can, but I think it's a combination of everything in place. You can have the best systems in the world. It doesn't mean that you can't be breached. If they want to get you, believe me, they will. It's just a matter of how you can prevent it, or how you can be less of a target. But I can tell you that if it's going to take a little bit more time for them to come after you, they're going to skip you and go on to the next. That's just the way it works. We see it all the time. So as far as protect, those are kind of the things that I wanted to make sure that I brought to your attention. So, Bo.
Thanks, Nelson. Next one is detect, establishing controls to reduce risk. This kind of the first step, baseline, known good state, kind of go back to identifying too as well. Every organization is going to want to, if you haven't done one, you haven't looked into it, you haven't done one in multiple years, do a risk assessment. You need to know what you're detecting, what you're preventing, you need to identify everything. If you don't know what it looks like on a sunny day, you're not going to know what it looks like on a rainy day. So you have to have a baseline. Continuous monitoring. There's a bunch of organizations that do SOC. What they do is they can detect things that it's just a constant 24/7 monitoring. There's a bunch of great companies out there. I'm not going to mention any names. I'm not trying to promote or sell anything at this. But the continuous monitoring, there's a lot of good organizations. If you don't have one in place, I would highly recommend at least looking into it, finding it out, seeing if it's worth it for you guys. What it can do is they're literally just monitoring that 24/7. A good example is, so say for example, your organization that just works within the United States. If all of a sudden they start seeing if it detects a bunch of traffic going back or going out towards Russia, that's going to send up some flags. And if it's, most organizations aren't having somebody there at 1 a.m. monitoring this, where if you have a 24/7 SOC support, they are monitoring it. They're going to throw up the flag and they're going to stop that. They're stopping things before they even know that happens. There is a bunch of good organizations out there, and I highly recommend looking into that if you guys don't already have that. The correlation of multiple events from multiple sources. My interpretation of this is people should not one person should have all the power. I know Nelson will elaborate on this a little bit further too as well. But in an event of multiple sources, I feel like it should be dividing, just kind of like how the United States is set up, checks and balances, the correlation of events and multiple sources. Vulnerability assessments. Once again, you're going to keep seeing this one come up. Bare minimum annually. And actually, I would recommend doing a penetration test. A vulnerability is just going to show your weaknesses. A penetration test is going to show how those weaknesses can be breached, and if they can be breached. And then the monitor of third-party services. Once again, like Nelson was saying before, whether it be your IT provider, whether it be your janitor staff, whether it be your cleaning crew, whether it be even if you guys have soda machines in your office and there's somebody coming in there to fill them, what is that guy doing? So really you got to monitor your third parties. A lot of breaches are coming in there. Once we were going through this with another organization, and we just told them to write them down, and they were at over 200 third parties that they were using, and still going. They just didn't realize how many third parties are they being monitored? Are they credentialed? Are they just some Joe Schmo that's going to come in and steal all your information? Nelson, want to add something?
Yeah. So with the continuous monitoring, we have certain systems that we put into place with our clients that that allow us to gather some logs. And for those of you who don't understand what the SOC acronym means, it means a Security Operations Center, where all this data is going to one location, and these logs are being gathered. And when there's something that's unusual or something that's suspicious, then the SOC is able to identify this as being an issue, and then go into the process saying, okay, this is what we're going to do next. We've seen this. Let's notify the client, or let's notify the IT person behind the monitoring to let them know what's going on. So we're always looking at those type of things. As far as a correlation of events between multiple sources, we always like to say that as the IT vendor, we don't want all the power. We're going to have obviously full administrative rights to your systems, but we don't want to have your administrative password. That should be yours and yours only. So that and you create another account where those other people that need administrative access just have an account that has administrative access. They don't have actually the administrative password. So and that goes to not just your IT systems, but your EHR, your practice management, any third party, and if you have any of the finance systems that you're using as well. So, and if you're going to keep those passwords, do me a favor, don't keep them on a WordPad file where you can access them. There are definitely third-party tools in place where you can keep all that stuff. One of the ones that we like to use is a product called LastPass. It's an app, and it has multi-factor authentication with it. So you can put all your passwords in there, and if you need to log into it and get information, you have the ability to do that. And you actually can have put other users on it that have access to it, and if they ever leave, you can just disable them. But yeah, having a third-party product to do that is very important. As far as third-party service providers, is very important. In the healthcare, again, there's a lot of third parties that that we're working with and that you're working with, that you need to make sure that they have the right security measures in place to protect you. So if you're going through a process and you're hiring a billing company, you make sure that you go through the process with them and ask them, show me your guidelines as far as HIPAA and security and privacy are concerned. What do you currently have in place? Because you want to protect not only yourself but your patients. And it's just not that. Like I had mentioned before, HVAC, any other third party that have access to your network one way or another. Think about those, or even physical access to it. Write those down and identify who are some of those that could have access to things. In a breach, and most recently we worked with someone that reached out to us because they got breached, and we reached out to the feds, and that was one of their questions: is okay, who are the third parties that you work with? Having that information, timing is everything. So to have that information and be able to share with the feds, or even with the forensic company that you're going to work with to try to figure out what happened is very important. So having that information is critical. So identifying those third parties are very important. So if that's something that you do that's easily for you to do, then I would highly recommend that. Bo?
Yep, that's a great segue right into the next one. Respond. Pre-incident response planning. Once again, you're going to hear me talk about this probably on every single slide. Incident response plan. Have it, know it. Make sure your employees know it. Make sure that it's not just the upper levels going over it. Everybody is going to be effective. Sit down, review it every 6 months minimally. That's no point of having an incident response plan if nobody knows what to do and times of a breach. You're going to get breached, and it's not an easy thing. You're going to be stressed. Having an incident response plan is taking away that burning, so you're not running around with the chicken like its head cut off. Containing the impact. What you're going to want to do is, if you do get breached, or I'll say when you do get breached, disconnect from the network. Whatever got breached, if it's a server that's getting breached, unplug that server. Unplug any station from the network. Don't unplug it completely. If there's anything in there that needs to be saved or could save, unplugging it, you might lose all that data, but definitely unplug it from the network so it can't spread. Analyze the scope of the damage, see what happened, see, what did you lose, whether it, did they get access to all your network files? Did they have all your network files? You have backups. Analyze the scope of the damage, find out how bad it's going to impact you, and all this will go back to the planning. All this stuff should be right in your incident response plan. Manage communications. You're not going to want to lie. That's the first and foremost, but you do have to report it. All 50 states, you have to report when you do get breached. Find out who you need to report it to. If there's tons of PR firms out there too as well that you could work with. You could just, even Google search PR firms of breached. There'll be people that specifically live, eat, and breathe for this. They're employed because of all these breaches. So, just protecting your reputation is a great thing there, but you never want to lie. You do want to manage communications and handle the responses as best as you can. And then implementing lessons learned. Go over what happened with everybody. Let them know, we were breached because Sally Joe clicked this link. Okay, whatever. Let's move on. Sally Joe is, either we're training her again or Sally Joe is gone. Whatever happens, we just make it be a lesson. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. Hopefully it's not going to shut down and cripple your organization. Getting breached might be the worst thing that's going to happen, but it could also be the best thing. Say it if it's just a breach and you guys are able to recover. It's a good wake-up call to let you know what was wrong, what you weren't doing right, and it gives you a good opportunity to fix these and to mitigate all these risks. Nelson?
Yeah, so I think this is a very important slide to kind of focus on the response. and I go back to a conversation that I had with, that we talked about, cyber insurance and having the right tools to help you. I can tell you that having that in place and having a cyber insurance plan to protect you is going to mitigate a lot of these different things that you need to plan for. They're going to help you plan that, and a lot of these things are going to help you contain that impact. Now, that doesn't mean that it's because you have insurance you're safe, but that's one step to help in this whole process of response. But you should have your own pre-incident response plan on how you should address things. I think that containing the impact and analyzing the scope of the damage is very important. Understand that with healthcare, anything over if health records, PHI has been compromised, anything over 500 records, you need to report it. There are certain ways on how to do it. I highly recommend, if it comes to that, make sure you work with legal before you go and report anything. There's a time period that you have to report it in. There's a process in it and how you have to do it. I would definitely suggest that you work with legal representation so that they can follow you through the steps. Because what happens is in an incident, I can tell you that legal is going to say they're going to need more information regarding the breach. And then at the same time, you have to remember you have to send notification. And that notification could be to 30 people or it could be to 3,000 people. And how you're going to do that is very important. Again, there's costs associated with that. So having the right people in the right spot to kind of handle these things are very important. As far as lessons learned, I can tell you that we in recent years are become kind of a target of attack. I had mentioned early on, and based on those attacks, we've learned how far people can get and what we can prevent in order for those things to happen. So I highly recommend that you take those precautionary measures, and once you've been breached, figure out what are some of the things that you've learned that you can apply for the next time to kind of mitigate and minimize that risk. That's all I have for respond.
Well said, Nelson. All right. So the last step is recover. Establishing controls to reduce risk. Once again, a lot of these things are going to look similar. They're going to look like the same things that we've been talking about the whole time, which in some way, shape, or form they are, but they are also their own things too as well. Managing public relations, Nelson did say a great thing. There is a certain time that you have to respond. Contacting legal first, I 100% agree with Nelson on that. I would say even before, contacting whoever you need to is maybe talk to a PR firm. Find out what the risk is going to be after you talk to legal. As long as you have enough time, you want to manage your reputation as much as possible. Without your reputation, what are you? If you're not going to want to work with an organization that's been breached several times or even once, if it's not publicly related on a good term. So just really managing that is can't stress that enough. Communicate recovery efforts to everybody. So just, not only just letting your team know, but also let legal know, also let PR know, also let the right, whether it be law enforcement or who you need to contact in that situation. Communicate the recovery efforts to everyone. Let them know what happened, let them know what you're doing, and what you guys are going to do to prevent that in the future. Having a fail over or a fail back and fail back. Once again, I'll go back to the same analogy. We're not in New Jersey. We're not going to have tornado insurance, or we're not going to have, the chances of getting hit with a tornado is not that probable. Maybe getting buried in a snowstorm is. So make sure that you have failovers for locations. Failover, if you can afford it, definitely having a second location to protect your data further away from your business as possible is great. Obviously, that can be a huge cost set for a lot of people. So at least having backup servers, maybe storing information in the cloud. Make sure that you guys do have backups. I cannot stress that enough. If you get hit with ransomware, they take all your information. If you have a backup, you can be okay. If not, you might as well just close your doors tomorrow. And corporate lessons learned. incident response plan, once again, if you get breached, once again, it's not a good day. It's not going to be a good day, but you can learn. Take it as a learning opportunity. Go over the incident response plan. What do you do after you get breached? Add that in. Maybe add another step that you didn't do before. If you get breached and, look at this is where we lacked, this is where we were slacking. We didn't contact legal first. We just contacted them. We didn't contact PR first. We just contacted the law enforcement. All of a sudden, we're on the 6 o'clock news, and now everybody's wondering what happened, why we're breached, what's going on, because maybe we should have contacted legal and PR first. Implement improvements going forward. If you see that you were breached because you forgot to patch something, because of some old authentication, because of faulty firewall, there's no point of even moving forward if you're not going to fix your mistakes. If you get breached because you forgot to patch, you're like, okay, whatever, it's not going to happen again, and you just decide not to do patching, not to do a new authentication, and not to get a new firewall, not to get a new server. There's no point. I mean, it's just, you're going to get breached again. It's just, I can't stress that enough. Obviously, when we're doing a vulnerability assessment or pen test, we're going to find a bunch of things that, are going to be troubleshooting, or are going to be troublesome, sorry. And, organizations aren't going to have the money to fix every single thing. And that's why we detail it down to high, medium, low, high probabilities. Obviously, there's always going to be flaws in people's networks. There's always going to be a way to get in. You're never going to be 100% secure. I can't stress that enough. You can do everything we discussed today, spend hundreds of millions of dollars on security, and you're still not going to be 100% secure. But if you do get breached, if something happens, just knowing that you need to fix these things, it's a wake-up call for a lot of people. And you'll see that all of a sudden that organization that didn't have, $20,000 to fix it, all of a sudden now the owner has $50,000 to fix it. So it's really about just improving and learning a lesson and moving forward. Nelson?
Yeah, so the only thing I really want to talk about in this slide is the failover, failback. We talk about backup, but it's more of a disaster recovery and business continuity, which kind of goes part of your incident plan, right? So one of the things that we emphasize and we talk about a lot is, having a disaster recovery and business continuity plan in place. So in the case if and that's kind of incorporated in your incident responses, if your systems get breached, if you have ransomware and your systems are now inaccessible, how are you going to get back? So having some kind of a disaster recovery business continuity plan in place is important. The plan is only as good as the execution of that plan. So if you do have some kind of backup or disaster recovery, the backup and the recovery is only as good as the last time you tested it. So part of that has to be evaluated on a regular basis. So with your IT firms and the companies that you're working with, you should have some kind of ongoing testing of recovery and business continuity to understand what that's going to happen, so that you understand. So that if I lose my mission critical application, your EHR, your practice management system, I know what it's going to take to bring that back up, and whether it's in the cloud or whether it's locally, whatever the case may be. So having that awareness of what the impact is going to be is very important. So having your backup, disaster recovery and business continuity plan as part of your incident plan is a big thing. So if anything, you're going to, from this slide, I would say make sure that backup, disaster recovery and business continuity are part of your plan. Bo?
Thanks, Nelson. Try to be time sensitive here. Implementation, establishing controls to reduce risk. Number one, the lack of upfront leadership, buy-in, and identifying roles. I can't stress it enough. Once again, if the CEO, if the owner, if whoever doesn't see the value in security, doesn't want to buy into it, doesn't get it, then you can't. As an organization, there's nothing you can really do. If you're an employee and you weren't properly trained, whose fault is that? If you didn't know you weren't supposed to be clicking links, I mean, it's not your job to know cybersecurity or to know what to do as an employee. It's management's job to be buying in and to be training you and to be educating you. Identifying roles there too as well. If you don't know what to do, you can't be expected to do it. Bottom line. A lot of people just mistaking a gap analysis for a risk assessment. A really quick way to explain that is, a gap analysis, all it is looking at in the organization is technical controls. It's looking at, your firewalls, your PCs, your servers, so all it's really looking at is the technical controls, and it's just kind of a general gap analysis, not specific towards your organization. It can be, but a lot of times they're just looking at the technical. Where a risk assessment is diving deeper into that. A risk assessment, they're doing interviews with department heads. They're finding out, each individual organization is different. They're interviewing people. They're actually talking to the people and not just looking at your technical controls that are in place there. And this one's great too as well. I'm in the cloud. I don't need NIST security standards. That's great. That is awesome. Just because you're in the cloud doesn't mean that you're secure. Office 365 is a great example. We'll use this example for a law firm. Office 365 is great. It's a great product, so I'm not by any means belittling it. But for example, so if you're an attorney, and you have Office 365, great. And that's all you have, that's all your backups, everything's there, it's in the cloud. If you delete an email, it is gone forever in 30 days. It is never, ever, ever coming back. That is gone with Office 365. If you have a backup in place, it can hold it for up to a couple years, or as long as you choose to do it. Especially, I just use the legal one because, most legal people are going to want to keep an email for more than 30 days. I'm not even legal, and if my emails from 2 months ago were gone, it's not going to be great for me either. They also do have antivirus and anti-spam on Office 365. It's okay. It's not great. You'd want to upgrade it. So just because you're in the cloud doesn't mean you're secure by any means. Involving unqualified individuals, putting somebody, say somebody that you have an IT manager. That's great. They can do help desk. They can reset your passwords. They can, get computers set up. They can do whatever. It doesn't mean they're a security expert. If your IT person doesn't know cybersecurity, and you're having them doing policies, and you're having them doing your risk assessments, and you're having them do your penetration tests, it's not good. It'd be like having a salesperson, having them go run electricity in your building. It's the same thing. Having somebody that's unqualified for that job is just as good as not doing it. In some instances, it can be a lot worse. Don't just hire somebody because they're cheaper. Don't just have somebody do it that doesn't know what they're doing. Hire a qualified professional. There's a reason why there's a difference between cybersecurity and IT. Nelson, I'll transfer over to you.
Yeah, so, I mean, for the sake of time, I know that this is probably going to be our last slide, but if there's anything that we talk about, and the focus was, starts at the top, right? Cybersecurity starts at the top. It should be part of the conversation from a leadership perspective. If you're having, meetings with your leadership team, and I'm sure that part of that conversation is talking about some of the things that you're doing to improve the business. Part of that conversation needs to be cybersecurity, and I'm sure IT is part of that as well. Have that conversation. Ensure that you're talking about it and coming up with some kind of discussion of how you're going to address it, or how you're going to have those conversations, so that it comes from the top down. Include those people that might be of help to you to implement it. So we talked about involving the unqualified individual. We want to have the right qualified people. So in those meetings, whether if it's a monthly meeting, and you should have somebody from a more technical and more experienced individual, that make sure that person's at the table during those conversations, so they can provide you with the guidance that you need in order to address some of these things. So I know we covered a lot during this presentation. My hope is that you took one thing back. We will. I know that the organization is going to send out this slide, the slide deck, and I think is going to put this presentation up on their website as well, so that you can review it at a later time. if there are any questions at this point in time, I think that we'll try to take one or two questions. Are there any questions,
Thank you,
Dawn,
Nelson
Bree?
and Bo. So I'm going to read off
You're
the
welcome.
questions now. If you have any additional questions, please type them in the question box now. So the first question was, are there PowerPoint slides available for download? And yes, I am going to email all of the attendees the PowerPoint slides as soon as this concludes. The second question is, can you really guarantee that they release my data if I pay the ransom?
I'll answer that. No. And here's what we're seeing. So we've seen where, yes, you pay the ransomware and they do release the data, but the attackers are being smarter now. What they're doing is they're providing they're on the dark web. They have the ability to sell the tool to encrypt everything, right? And they're saying, okay, for you other hackers, if you want to buy this tool, just buy the tool and pay me X amount of dollars to use the tool. And here's the tool to encrypt everything, and here's the tool to decrypt everything. So the bad guys that are doing this are now just giving the tool so that somebody else can do it. Now, these other somebody else's are not as technical or not as intelligent in how they do it. And we've seen it where they go through the process, they encrypt your stuff, and they say, we're going to decrypt it. We're going to give you a decryption key, and they never do. So the answer is no. They won't. I can tell you that there is no guarantees. You're dealing with criminals, and as far as I know, criminals, there's no such thing as a criminal with ethics. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. And the next question is, do you have any policy template or language in regards to utilizing HIPAA secure email and texting?
Well, there are policies that we share with some of our clients, but we also highly recommend that if you have a third party that you're working with, whether it be a law firm or whether it be your HR company that provide, they typically have some of that stuff. So I think it's a combination of a few different people that you can work with to develop one template. I think that depending on your organization, there's no such thing as a template that fits all. Everything is unique to each individual, but there are some guidelines that you can follow. So I will be following up with an email with everybody. So if you like to speak about it individually, you can do that as well.
And then the last question was kind of on top of that one. Are there any recommendations for HIPAA secure email and texting software?
Well, yes. So I think if you're using Office 365 out of the box, it's out of the box. There's certain measures that you can put into place in order to ensure that your email is secure. One of the things that I highly recommend is using multi-factor authentication. So if you're gonna use Office 365, that there's an additional security measure to authenticate yourself. In order to do that, there are other tools in place that you can use for encryption. So if you're emailing back and forth, and PHI is part of what you're emailing, and obviously you need to make sure that transmission of data is encrypted. So you need to have a third-party tool to encrypt. There's a number of one that Proofpoint, Zix is another product. There's a couple of different products out there that you can use in order to protect yourself. But the one thing I can tell you is, out of the box, Office 365, there are a lot of security measures that you can put into place. And I can tell you that 90% of the time when we see folks go on Office 365, they don't put any security measures in place. And there's actually a way to score how secure your Office 365 is. Actually, maybe I'll send out an email to really, if you're using Office 365 so you can see your score, you just go to that email, you just go to that website and put in your domain name and it'll give you a score. So yes, so those are the type of things that you need to be, and again, sometimes it has to do with common sense, right? If you see an email and it's just fishy, don't bother it. If it's that important, they'll call you. and those are the things that I think it's awareness. But, you know, it's human nature that, you know, we're curious and we want to be able to look at things and click on things. And so just be conscious of that when you're going to some of these emails.
Okay, and that concludes the questions. Sure.
Okay. The one more thing I want to say is the things that we're seeing as well is how people are gathering credentials. So credentials mean that they're going after your credentials. Now there are products out there that you can do a dark web scan where you can see if your domain or your email has been compromised. We actually do that for our clients on a regular basis, where we're monitoring to see if their credentials are on the dark web. So that might be something as well that you might want to take a look at. And it's pretty scary when you run that, because that basically says, we have your username and password and we're putting it for sale on the dark web. So if you're an administrator or if you're an executive director at a practice and you have keys to the kingdom and somehow your email is on the dark web with your credentials, it's a little scary thing. So if you keep changing your passwords and putting those type of measures into place, it's gonna help you and protect you in the long run. And with that said, I think I already went over a little bit, so my apologies, but you know, we're pretty passionate about this topic, and hopefully everyone got some good stuff out of it. So thank you again.
Again, thank you, Nelson and Bo. If there are no further questions for the day, once again, this presentation is going to be emailed to all participants and will be available on our website for members only. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to the presenters directly. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a great day.
Thank you.